And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage. And you're joining us on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Dr. Ivan Misner. Ivan is the founder and chief visionary officer of BNI, which is the world's largest business networking organization. It's been around for over 30 years and it has chapters in over 9,000 chapters in every populated continent of the world. He's a multiple New York Times bestselling author. He's written 24 books. He's the father of modern networking. He is the man when it comes to networking, basically, and has done really some amazing and interesting things with regards to getting it out in his thinking and his messaging out into the world in a big way. So thanks for joining us today, Ivan.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be on with you.
Great. So let's roll back the tape 30 some odd years, and there you are with PhD. You've got your thinking around networking and the importance of networking and the value of networking. And somehow here we are today, 24 books later, trillions of dollars in value created in the universe as a result of your thinking. So that's amazing, amazingly cool stuff. But how do when you're thinking about today, the world today versus 35 years ago, what are you doing differently? And maybe what are you doing similarly to get your messaging out to as many folks as you can?
Well, I think clearly the biggest change is technology. And this is a perfect example of that. The idea that we could get on the internet, and I don't know where you're located. I'm in Austin, Texas. Whereabouts are you?
I'm in New York.
Okay, so just the idea that we could get on some device and record, not on telephones, with you in New York and me in Texas was incomprehensible when I started
Sure.
BNI. The second largest line item in my budget back in 1985 was the telephone bill. It was employees, telephone bill. And now you can do something like this for free. You can call anywhere in the world. And so the changes in technology it's flattened the communication hierarchy. It not only enables us to do something like this, but it enables me to talk live to groups anywhere in the world. I can get online via Skype or Zoom or some system and actually talk to people live worldwide, and it's free. I can do podcasts, and people comment, and when they comment, I can reply. That's what I mean by flattening the communication hierarchy, and I think it's incredibly powerful. I can't imagine. We now have 9,125 chapters in more than 70 countries. I can't imagine doing that over the phone. It
Right.
would just be
Exactly.
impossible.
So you could, I mean, even taking it down to that level, you could quote, sort of visit every chapter from Austin, Texas, if you chose to.
Yeah, theoretically, absolutely, and I do many. I do a lot of,
Yeah.
live visits, but particularly a lot of videos, where I'll do a video message, which is also incredibly simple. In '85, I would have had to put it on a VHS recorder and mail it.
Right.
Now I can just email it to
Exactly.
somebody anywhere.
So where do you sort of draw the line? Because you've got to use a subset of your content to make people that aren't aware of what the concepts are and aware of what the value prop is for BNI and all that. And then there has to be a line in the sand that says, okay, once you cross that line, that's paid. So do you have any sort of rules of thumb or philosophies underneath that?
Yeah, so, things that are very, very BNI centric, how we run a meeting, some of, behind the drapes kind of stuff we don't share publicly. But otherwise, everything's fair game. I really believe the best way to grow an organization is to provide a lot of content. And so I have been, a believer in content marketing before it was called content marketing, and to put a lot of stuff out there. Very few people will go through all the stuff I've ever put out, compile it together, and then create a business, that will compete with me.
Right.
And so I'm not really worried about that. And even if they did, they wouldn't have the culture. You can steal stuff, you can steal people's ideas, but it's hard to steal culture. And that's a whole other discussion. So I put a lot out there, and I'm not particularly worried about it, other than, some very specific BNI centric kinds of training we do.
Okay, so you're putting a moat around sort of the crown jewels, any sort of proprietary IP methodology,
Yeah.
obviously financials, systems, and such like that. But the core essence of your content, the givers get, and sort of the messaging that's in the book, it seems to me as if you're putting that out in more formats to more people in more ways today than ever before.
Yeah.
And obviously, part of that probably aligns to your philosophy of being generous, but there's probably another part of it where there's got to be a yield. Does that
Well,
hold true?
there definitely is. I mean, we have 9,000 groups around the world. It's definitely paid off. We get a better name recognition than probably anyone else. A few years ago, I had somebody who started a competitive organization. They didn't really know BNI. They hadn't been a BNI member, but they started an organization like BNI. And he had a falling out with his partner. He was in Europe. He had a falling out with his partner, and he met with me. He asked if I'd meet, and I said, "Yeah, sure." So I sat down with him, and he had an interesting journey. He was so mad at his partner, he was now promoting BNI. But here's the funny thing. He said, "When I was running the company with my partner, we hated your books." And I said, "Why? Why? Why did you hate my books?" He said, "Because we would walk into groups, our groups, and they would have your book. And they would say, how come you guys aren't doing this? We need stuff like this because this guy's telling us how to network. You guys aren't telling us how to. You're throwing us in a room and you're not telling us how to network." So to me, that was absolute proof that
Sure,
being open with a lot of your content, not everything, but a lot of your content actually is attractive to the public. It
sure.
doesn't take away business.
Yeah, and the amount of people that would actually try to, well, one is blatantly steal it. I
Yeah.
mean, that's just, it's done, but it's not done often. Even if they did, like you said, between culture and brand and all that, you really don't have much to worry about.
Right, exactly. And then and the one thing that's really funny about in my business in particular is that people will when they do take ideas, you can't steal copyrighted material because
Of
we
course,
have you there,
right,
but they can take ideas. But the funny thing is they almost always say stuff like we're BNI without the rules.
right.
I love those groups because
Thank
they
you. Right, right,
fail.
right. That's,
They
yeah, of
fail
course.
because it's like hockey without rules would be boxing on ice.
Yeah,
You know,
right,
you
right,
gotta
right.
have
Yeah,
rules. So, they just don't get it.
yep,
They get material, they try to use the material, but they don't have the culture behind it. Part of our
yep.
culture, one of our core values is accountability. You gotta have accountability.
Exactly. So I want to pivot for a moment, if we could, given you've written more books than many people read today, right? Uh, and have seen the publishing world change and change and change again. I want to talk about that a little bit because it used to be this aura of the New York publishing world owning the universe,
They did.
and it was a binary world. You were either with the big shot New Yorkers or you were, in the reject pile. But
Yeah.
there's so many different business models underlying publishing, from hybrid model, self-publishing, traditional, et cetera, et cetera. Talk to someone out there today that's got some great content and has been doing some cool things with it as they start to sort of unpack this goofy world of publishing, things they should be thinking about. Because you're one of the pioneers in sort of on the hybrid model
Yeah.
with one of your 29% solution, et cetera. And that was,
Right.
I think people looked at that and said, wow, Ivan's going there. Like, and it was like, there's reasons, right?
So I've done it all.
Yep.
My first book was self-published, and back
Yep.
in the day, I did my first book in 1989. I'll tell you that the title was Networking for Success, and if you don't recognize it, it was because I think I sold 20 copies. You know, it, that was that was the era where self-publishing is a bad idea. Not
We would call
anymore.
that a limited edition today. We'll call
Yeah,
it a limited edition.
yeah. And so I've done it all. I've
Yep.
self-published. I've done a hybrid. I've done a co-publish. I've done major publishers like Nelson Press and
Yep.
Entrepreneur Press, and I like all of them for different reasons. They all have strengths and they all have weaknesses, and I kind of bounce around depending on what I'm trying to do with a book. I bounce around from either a major publisher to an Amazon publishing. I don't do too much co-publishing or hybrid anymore, but I'll do an Amazon publishing through their Create Space, or now they're calling it KDP.
When you say depending on what I'm trying to do with the book,
Yeah.
unpack that a little bit. So is it about trying to get a message out? Trying to, what does that mean?
So if I have a book that is really a niche, it's a limited market. For example, I got a book coming out, and hopefully it'll be out in August, called The Networking Mentor.
Okay.
That is not going to be a New York Times bestselling book. It's just not.
Okay. You heard it here first, folks.
Mhm. It's a niche.
Right.
By the way, I can push it to a bestseller list on Amazon. And people ask me, how do you push a book? What's the secret to pushing a book to an Amazon bestseller? I said, pushing a book to a bestseller on Amazon is easy. What's hard is getting a following of 290,000 people. That's hard.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
I have 289,000 members. That's the hard thing. You get 289,000 members, you can push a book to a bestsellers list by just putting it out there. So I don't think that's going to be. It's a niche book. It's about networking and it's about mentorship. So it's, you're cutting the pie down
Yep.
pretty slender. On the other hand, if you have a book like the latest book that I published is called Who's in Your Room, which is a self-help book. I wanted a publisher for that. I wanted a traditional publisher that would get it both in bookstores and in Amazon. And so you can't publish it on KDP and get the bookstores don't they don't like it when it's an Amazon published book.
Sure.
They're resistant, and you need most of the there's really only made one bookstore now, Barnes and Noble, but they use Baker and Taylor or Ingram.
Right.
You got to go through. You can't just go to them direct to Barnes and Noble. So you got to use a distributor like Baker and Taylor or Ingram, and the only way to do that really is to have a publisher. You can't
Got it.
publish it yourself. So there, I had to have a publisher because I needed it in bookstores. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no. So in essence, you're defining your business objectives up front.
Yeah,
Underneath that fits the right publishing model.
yeah,
There's obviously a financial model, right, in terms of where you're going to take risk and where you're not going to take risk. I would also say, and you wouldn't touch on it here, but given how crowded the market is, right, that the importance that the book be good and thoughtful and chock full of things that I can do and think about and tactics, etc. I think people sort of fast forward through that part, a lot.
yeah,
And the market, the scarcest resource I have is my time, right?
yeah.
So
Right,
part of the exchange in a book is whether I paid $25 for it is, hey, you want to spend 6 hours of your time on this? Better be good, right?
right. So yeah, that to me that's a union card. If the book isn't
Yep.
good, why are you doing this? Which means you need a professional editor. Even when I self-publish a book, I use a professional editor always
Hmm.
because there are strengths and weaknesses that I have in editing. Content's fine, but I have a thing with punctuation. My wife, I drive my wife crazy with my punctuation. So you need to have somebody edit your work. But you also need to understand, besides quality, there's some benefits to having a book, but you got to do it for the right reasons. If you're looking to get rich writing books, you got to have a better chance of getting rich in the stock market because it's very difficult. I'm not sure I've ever made a lot of money on book sales through bookstores.
Right. Right. Just measured strictly compensation to you by number of
Yeah,
units sold.
yeah.
Right. Direct.
Now
Direct.
I've made a boatload of money selling my books in the back of the room
Of course. Yeah.
and selling my books to my organization.
Yes.
I can't complain that I haven't made money on my books. I have, but I haven't made a boatload of money in selling them in bookstores. And so people think that they're going to become rich with bookstore sales, and it's really rare. Now, so why do a book if you don't have a big platform like I have? Why do a book?
Yep.
Well, guess what? In 1989, when I came out with my first book, and even in 94, when I came out with my first truly published book, which was The World's Best Known Marketing Secret, I didn't have much of a platform.
Right.
So why did I do it? I did it for a couple of reasons. One was that I hoped that the media would be willing to interview me because what I knew was that if I went to the media and said, "Hey, talk to me about networking," and they'd say, "Look, you're the
Who are
founder of
you?
BNI.
Right.
Yeah, take an ad out.
Right.
We're
Right.
not going
Right.
to talk
Right.
about
Right.
you and your business." But
Right.
I discovered that the media will interview any idiot with a book, and I have 24. So you get a lot of interviews regularly, which builds your brand, it builds your name recognition, and builds your credibility. So you should write a book and publish it to build credibility.
Yep.
And if it makes money, that's a gift.
And I think today, going back to your thread on the technology, while we all respect and admire what the media could do for your brand, you can also create your own media, right? So you can take the derivatives of the book and put it out strategically and thoughtfully via social
Yes.
media to get it in front of the right audiences at a micro level. So it used to be,
Yes.
if you were an author and got on the Today Show in the 90s, wow, grand slam home run, money in the bank. Today, they don't even do that. I mean, it's very, very, very rare that you get an author on a morning talk show or something. You have to
Eh,
create your own
I don't know. I
audiences
was
and
on I was on
identify.
the Today Show about 6 or 7 years ago, and it certainly is great, but it's. 24
Right, but
books. I got
you're
one book that I did the Today Show with.
right, and you know, your resume is also such that you had 20 under your belt when you did it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, pretty
Yeah,
close.
so
Yeah,
that might be an exception. What I'm saying is there's ways to find sort of the niches and,
yeah,
and the micro markets on social.
yes,
So when you talk about your book that's mixing networking and mentoring, I would be thinking about marking that on, okay, well, where are all the groups that people are sort of mentoring, hanging out on online? And what are the, you know, podcasts they're listening to, all that sort of
oh
stuff.
yeah.
You can find
And
them.
my social media, Facebook. I
Yep,
have a podcast. I'll put it up
yep.
there. But I'll tell you where it's going to mostly sell. It'll sell in BNI.
Yeah, of course.
It's going to sell a boatload of books. It might be one of my best-selling books in BNI.
Because of the sheer numbers of the membership today.
Yeah, and the topic, because
Yep,
one of our core areas that we focus on is mentoring new members. You got to teach
yep,
them how to network because we don't teach this in colleges and universities. So it'll sell in the
yep.
public because it's not a book about BNI, although the example is BNI.
Sure.
And we say right up front, what we're talking about here works in any network. We're
Yep.
going to use BNI as an example. So it'll sell, but its biggest sale would be within BNI. Whereas who's in your room? BNI was not my biggest market. The biggest market will be the people who follow me on social media, which is exactly what you're saying.
Exactly. So non-BNI members that are sort of once removed
Yeah, probably half and
BNI.
half. Half of them are
Yeah,
BNI, half of them are not.
got it. So I want to flip it again, if I could. So when we think about,
It's your show. Flip it wherever
yes.
you'd like.
So I would be remiss if I didn't take advantage of the opportunity, you know, given you're sort of the father or grandfather or whatever on
No,
the
no,
net.
don't call me the grandfather. They haven't
Okay.
gotten there yet.
I'll call you the
It's
young kid. The young,
Yeah, no, it's not even that. I have enough gray hair, but they're still calling me the father of modern network. That was CNN, God bless them, that
okay.
said that. So
So we'll call you the father of networking, right? So
thanks.
what networking meant in 1989 or 1994 or whatever was very different than what it means today, but it's not. What I mean by that is it used to be that, and I think this is probably the essence and the beauty of BNI as an organization, that face to face, the mano to mano with a fellow member of the community, as we were defining community primarily in a geographic way, right?
Right.
And today we define communities in so many ways where it's not just geography. So talk about sort of the importance of networking, even though it might not be in a hand-to-hand combat sort of, you know, geographic centric exclusive way.
Right. So that's a great question. Let me read to you or share with you my definition of what networking is. And I think you'll find that my definition fits both 1985 and 2019, believe it or not. Here's my definition. Networking is the process of developing and activating your relationships to increase your business, comma, enhance your knowledge, comma,
Mm-hmm.
or expand your sphere of influence. So you can do that through face-to-face networking, and you can do that with social networking online. There's many different ways you can do it because we're talking about
Sure.
increasing your business, which is what most people know me for. But also, networking is about sharing knowledge and information.
Absolutely.
It's also about expanding your sphere of influence. Nonprofit organizations have to network,
Yep.
but they're not getting sales from it. They probably get ideas, but that's not their. They want charitable support, community support,
Sure.
and so that as a definition works in any context. So I think the biggest change to networking is, of course, technology, but technology hasn't replaced face to face.
No.
In
Of
our
course not.
first 11 years at BNI from 1985 to 1996, we opened 500 BNI groups. So 1996, 1997 is considered by most people really the beginning of the World Wide Web. So from 1997 to 2008, the second 11 years of BNI, we didn't open 500 groups. We opened 5,000.
Right. Right.
So technology, people say, "Oh, technology has probably really impacted your business." Yeah, it has.
In a
It's
great way.
it's grown it exponentially.
But let's touch on, let's call it the lack of etiquette, or people don't understand sometimes what to do in social. So if someone invited me to a networking event in my community, cocktail party, whatever it would be, I wouldn't run into the room and say, look at me, buy from me," right? Like I just wouldn't do that,
Yeah,
right? But people do that on
right.
social all the time where they don't have an understanding or respect for the norms of a LinkedIn group or an exchange. It's all about that. And I just find that so disturbing. It's just a lack.
Yeah, well, they do it face to face as well, but they do it, online or face-to-face. I call it the networking disconnect.
Yeah.
And I came up with that phrase because I went to an event. I was in London. There were about 900 people in the audience. And I don't know what possessed me, but I just called an audible before I started. And I said, you know what? I'm going to ask you two questions. And this was an all-day affair. I was the keynote speaker, but it was an all-day affair, so there was a lot of networking. I said, how many of you are here today? Raise your hands. If you're hoping to, maybe just possibly sell something. I'm sorry. Yeah. How many of you are here to sell something? Everybody.
Right. Right.
I'm telling you, 900 people raised their hand. Then the second question I asked was, how many of you are hoping to, maybe just possibly buy something?
Yeah. None.
No one raised their hands. So this is what I call the networking disconnect. People show up wanting to sell. Nobody's there to buy. So a lot of people use networking as a face-to-face cold calling opportunity or as a online cold calling opportunity. And that's not the way to network. The way to network is to build relationships. You build
Yep.
relationships, and that leads you to business.
Exactly. Exactly. And those same, I would call it, there's the disconnect between the principles and the tactics. So those same principles would hold face in person or via social. Great. So as we start to wrap here, any advice for someone just sort of starting out down this path of content creation, thought leadership, monetizing their content, sort of an up and comer, someone that's got some experience, do's and don'ts or tricks of the trade?
Well, that's a 20-minute answer and a question and answer response to in and of itself. So let me see if I can give you a couple of things. I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make in business, and with we're now in more than 70 countries, so been successful in scaling my business. There's over 8,000 people who work for a BNI now. I think that what you want to do if you want to be successful in business is you got to learn to do 6 things 1,000 times, not 1,000 things 6 times.
So true, right?
And so many people are doing 1,000 things 6 times. They keep bouncing around from one thing to another. They don't understand why they're not successful. It's because you're not focusing. So you got to focus. I think another thing that people have to understand is that they got to work in their flame and not in their wax. What are you excited about? What do you love to do? And that's where you need to be spending your time. Now, I get it where sometimes you have to do stuff. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do to do what you want to do. But once you start achieving success, you need to start hiring people to do the stuff you hate to do. For me, it was bookkeeping.
Yeah.
I hated bookkeeping. I can read a financial statement. I just don't like I don't like to. And I certainly don't like to be the person creating the financial statement.
Right.
So, that's not my flame. So I hired somebody that was their flame. And I know how to read it. I know how to deal with
Sure.
it, but I don't want to do it. And so the more you can work in your flame and not in your wax, the more likely you are to achieve a level of success and scale your business. Is that the kind of thing you're looking for?
Yeah, no, I think that's right because I think where I see thought leaders, both aspiring and incredibly successful ones, get sucked into things that are just not productive, right? If your
Yeah,
forte is creating amazing content or being a great speaker or research, whatever the case may be, what are you fiddling around with Twitter for? What are you doing? Like that just
right,
it's not a good use of your time. Now you might want to do it to get a cursory understanding of how it works and this, that, and the other thing,
right.
but you shouldn't be the one managing sort of those things at the granular level. So I
No,
agree.
you shouldn't. You
Yeah.
shouldn't. And a long time ago, I hired a social media guy
Yep.
who does all of that. And I know enough to get me in trouble. I can get on there and do some things, but I pretty much let him, you know, do it all.
Got it.
So for me, it's about setting time, just like you described, Peter, setting time aside to do the stuff that's working in my flame. So,
Exactly.
and when I write a book, I set at least a day a week aside. That's my writing day. I write all day, usually on Wednesdays. I write all day and produce material. And that material for a book might become part of my blog. It might be a part of a
Sure.
podcast. It could be anything. But it all ends up kind of going into a book that I might do.
Excellent. Well, this has been fantastic. I can't thank you enough for joining us today and sharing a lot of experience over a lot of years, and most importantly, just being transparent and sharing with us your story. Thank you so much, Ivan.
Hey, Peter, thank you. Happy to come back anytime. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Thanks. To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.